Hi, I'm Varela. My family gave every grandchild a college fund except me. Why waste it on her? My sister said they all laughed like it was nothing. At dinner, they toasted to legacy, while I poured my own drink sitting by the trash bins. They erased me from the photos, the speeches, the family stories, like I was never meant to belong. But on graduation day, I took the mic, and even my sister, the one who called me worthless, went pale. Before we dive in, tell me what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop it in the comments because what you're about to hear is what happens when the forgotten one stops staying silent. I arrived a few minutes before they started clapping for the Yale acceptance speech. Bethlehem had that sticky spring heat that makes your blouse cling before you even cross the lawn. The backyard was done up in blue and white balloons tied to folding chairs, mason jars full of sweet tea sweating in the sun, and a table creaking under store-bought sheet cake and trays of meatballs. Everyone was already seated, everyone but me. My cousin Belle was glowing in her cap and gown, sitting dead center with Grandpa Gerald beside her, hands on her shoulders like she was royalty. The KALIN pride was in full swing, loud and booming, filled with clinks of glasses and exaggerated, "Can you believe it?" shouts. I offered my gift, hand-wrapped, nothing fancy. Just a signed copy of a book on first-year college survival I knew Belle would never read. I placed it gently on the table next to a stack of other presents. A few minutes later, I saw Isolde adjusting the gift pile, quietly moving mine to the far edge. And when photos went up later that night, my book was labeled as hers. Classic. They handed me a name tag. It said Varela, not close enough to pass for a typo, not far enough to be forgivable. I peeled it off and stuck it in my pocket. No one noticed. Or maybe they did. There were no open seats near the main table, just a folding chair tucked awkwardly by the fence, half shaded by the trash bins. I sat. No one offered me a drink. No one asked me how I'd been. I poured my own sweet tea from a half-empty pitcher, ignored the bees, and kept my smile flat and my shoulders tight. A group of younger kids ran past, laughing and tossing their little graduation favors. One girl knocked over a paper napkin folded like a crane. I had spent an hour folding those that morning just to add a touch of thoughtfulness. She crushed it under her sandal. I picked it up silently and smoothed it out. The wings were creased, permanently bent. I slipped it into my pocket. I had folded 50 of them. Grandpa Gerald clinked his glass with the back of a butter knife. "Let's raise a toast," he boomed, voice still military sharp, despite the years, to Belle, who is making the KALIN name proud. First in this family to go Ivy. First to carry this family forward the right way. He looked around as if expecting applause. He got it. A raucous wave of cheers, even a few whistles. I took a breath, trying to push past the heat crawling up my neck. I cleared my throat and said, "What about the college fund?" It came out softer than I intended, barely enough to cut through the noise. But he heard me. So did Isolde. She leaned over her wine glass, smirked without even turning her head, and said, "Why waste it on her?" There was a split second where everything froze. Forks paused midair. Aunt Denise blinked like she'd misheard. Then someone laughed, a nervous little chuckle, and then another. It spread like a virus. A few heads turned. Most didn't. They moved on. No one defended me. Not my brother Joel. Not my cousin Liam. Not even my mother, who was refilling the punch bowl. I smiled. A trick I'd mastered years ago. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes but keeps you from cracking. I didn't say a word. I nodded, looked down at my lap, and told myself it didn't matter. But inside, I was burning. They had no idea. No idea about the years I worked 2 jobs just to keep my apartment. No clue that I skipped my own college graduation to cover rent. Not once did I ask for help. Not once. And yet here I was, still being treated like the family inconvenience. So this is the story they tell. Now I thought that I wasn't worth the investment. A story where Isolde gets labelled the generous one for using money our father set aside for all the grandchildren and quietly rerouted it for her own kids. A story where I'm just the name they keep getting wrong on purpose. A little boy reached for another napkin bird. I tensed. He picked it up, wrinkled it with his sticky fingers and tossed it into the grass. I stared at it for a moment before picking it up again. I didn't say a word to him either. Later, as the sun dipped and the bugs started to swarm, the citronella candles, I made my way to the house and slipped into the guest bathroom. I locked the door. The mirror caught my reflection. Chin lifted, jaw tight, shoulders squared as if bracing for another blow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared. And then somewhere deep inside me something shifted. A quiet voice. Not angry, not desperate, just done. Remember this, it whispered. Not for vengeance, not even for justice, just so I'd never forget. Where I stopped shrinking, where the story started to change. I didn't speak that night, but I didn't forget. A month later, the memory was still folded inside me like the crane I'd tucked into my purse, crushed quiet but not gone. It was his oldest daughter's birthday brunch. The invitation came in a group message with no greeting, just a flyer in a line that read, "We could use help with drinks, thanks." Not even a direct ask, not even a name. Still, I showed up early as always. I wore a soft blue blouse, brought balloons, and wrapped a unicorn plush in gold tissue with a handwritten note tucked into the ribbon, "For Laya from Auntie V." The venue was a multi-purpose hall at a local church, plastic tablecloths, floral centerpieces, and a faint smell of reheated casseroles that had seeped into the carpet long ago. I thought maybe showing up early would give me a moment with someone, anyone. Maybe this time I'd be something other than background. I helped set up the juice station, adjusted chairs, even folded a few napkins into fans. "Hey, miss." I turned around. A woman in a floral dress held out a dirty plate with half-eaten pancake and a smear of jelly. She looked about 60, probably a neighbor or someone's mother-in-law. Could I get another set of forks at the table by the bathroom? I blinked. "Sorry," she smiled, tilting the plate toward me like I'd missed a cue. The forks were short. I reached out, took the plate. "Of course," I said as she walked away. I looked around the room. Isolde was laughing with a friend by the mimosa bar. GERALD was fiddling with the speaker wires. No one corrected the woman. No one said, "That's not the waitress." "That's my sister." I fetched the forks. Later, after Happy Birthday was sung and half the guests had left their paper plates behind, Isolde's oldest stood on a chair with a microphone in hand, all grace and pageantry. "Before we clean up," she said, smiling broadly, "I just want to thank everyone who made today so special, especially Marlene, my shopping buddy and unicorn co-conspirator." She held up the plush I'd picked out. The gold ribbon was gone. So was the note. People clapped. I didn't. I scanned the floor. My card was face down under the table, stained with pink punch and a speck of frosting. No one noticed it. No one asked. That unicorn was mine, bought with my paycheck, wrapped with my hands and given from my heart. And just like my name, it had been reassigned again. I didn't interrupt. I didn't call her out. I swallowed and sat in the folding chair by the kitchen, the one no one ever really wanted, right next to the swinging door that staff used to carry trays in and out. I wasn't dressed like staff. I wasn't hired help, but I might as well have been. No one saw me. They never did. And still I smiled. I looked at Laya, who was too busy playing with wrapping paper to notice the unicorn at all. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the napkin crane, the same one I'd picked up by the trash bin weeks ago. It was still wrinkled soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. I placed it gently next to her cake plate. A small wish, maybe, that someone might care enough to keep it. 5 minutes later, someone knocked over their punch. Red liquid soaked into the napkin, bleeding through the folds, warping the wings. A woman picked up the cup. No one picked up the crane. I didn't move. And yet inside me something was... Because it wasn't just the plush. It wasn't just the forks. It wasn't even the name tag. It was that I'd let them tell my story again. After the party, as I helped stack chairs, Isolde approached. Her heels clicked with confidence, her voice syrup sweet. "You really helped today?" she said. "It's good to have you around for things like this." I looked at her. She was already turning to leave when I said I know exactly what I'm around for. She paused just for a second, then walked on like she hadn't heard it, but I knew she had. And this time I didn't bite my tongue. I didn't raise my voice, but I began remembering everything. It started like any other Thursday at the community college. Late spring sun hanging low, kids dragging backpacks too big for their backs, and faculty balancing coffee with overfilled tote bags. I was just finishing my tutoring shift when Diana, one of the admin aides, waved me over. "There's a little thing in the auditorium," she said. A slideshow recognizing local academic families. "KALIN's in it. Thought you might want to see." KALIN. That name still caught like a splinter under the skin. I walked over telling myself it wouldn't matter. I was only staying a few minutes. But when the lights dimmed and the projector hummed to life, I took a seat in the back row. The first slide was titled Bethlehem's Academic Legacies. And there it was. Our name, my name, sort of the KALIN family. 3 generations of educational dedication. Isolde's photo came up first, smiling beside her husband holding a plaque from some local parent council. Then the slideshow moved to her daughter's Yale acceptance letter framed like scripture. Then cousins. Then their awards, their school spirit week, photos, their pictures in front of scholarships, smiling with deans, handshakes mid-frame. Then a quote, "We've always believed in hard work, humility, and showing up for each other." It read attributed to Isolde KALIN. I sat still. My name nowhere, not one photo. Not even from the year I'd won the county essay competition. No mention that I'd worked as a writing tutor here for 6 years, or that I'd graduated top of my class at Wilkes in the evenings while working 2 jobs. After the lights came back up, I walked toward the front like I didn't feel like a ghost. I found the woman who had organized the event, Heather, a kind, distracted adjunct, who was already packing away her laptop. "Hey," I said gently, "can I ask where did you get the information for the KALIN family slide?" She looked up confused. "Oh, your last name is KALIN too." I nodded. She blinked. "I'm so sorry. I just went off what Isolde sent over. I didn't realize you were part of that family too." There it was. I wasn't part of that family. Not in public. Not in the story they wanted to tell. It wasn't an oversight. It was intention. Branding even. That was when I felt it. Not pain exactly, but a sinking realization. I had been edited out of my own bloodline. On the walk back to my car, memories started flooding in like someone had yanked open a drawer I'd kept shut too long. Age 15. The statewide writing competition. I'd worn a thrifted skirt and a too big blouse, and stood shaking as I accepted the plaque. GERALD didn't come. That same week, he hosted a dinner at home for Joel, our cousin, who'd just been suspended for skipping work and mouthing off at their warehouse manager. GERALD raised his glass and said, "This family is about grit. Joel's got it. He just needs guidance." I'd sat at the end of the table silent. My plaque was in my lap, not on the wall. I told myself back then I must have misread the moment that maybe I didn't need recognition to belong. But no, they hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately made me small. At first it was subtle, missing my name on invites, cropped photos, where I was halfway out of frame, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Comments like, "You're not really like the rest of us," said with a chuckle, like that was supposed to be comforting. They'd created a version of our family where I didn't exist. I drove back to my apartment in silence, but not in denial. And then Jamari. He was standing in the hall when I returned to the tutoring centre. Just a student with a backpack slung low and eyes full of questions. "You were in the slideshow?" he asked. I hesitated. "No." He looked back at the screen that was still playing on loop. "Well, they forgot someone," he said. "You helped me more than any of them." My throat tightened, but I smiled. "Thanks, Jamari." I walked into the break room, sat down at the little round table with the flickering light overhead, and pulled out the folded flyer I'd stuffed in my bag, the one announcing the academic family's celebration. I tore out the corner with the KALIN quote and folded it slowly, methodically into a crane. Crisp folds, sharp edges, not rushed. Then I pinned it to the community board with a thumbtack, right under a sign that read, "What inspires you?" And under the bird, I wrote, "Don't let anyone write your history without your permission." The next morning, someone had added a sticky note underneath. This hit harder than anything they said in the assembly. That night, for the first time in years, I opened the old storage bin in my closet. Inside were newspaper clippings, award letters, family newsletters, things with pieces of me in them, photos. They'd pretended didn't exist. I laid them out on the table like puzzle pieces. They hadn't just made me invisible. They'd constructed a lineage without me, and that I wasn't going to let stand. I had been erased quietly. I would return louder. The day I dropped off my application for the Pennsylvania Adult Re-Education Grant, the sky was overcast but warm, typical for June in Bethlehem. I remember thinking the clouds looked like they were waiting for something to break open. Maybe I was too. I'd filled out the forms with care, double-checked my supporting documents, even wrote a short essay about my long-term goal to earn a degree in community advocacy, so I could help people like me, people who never fit the mold, who'd slipped through cracks their own families had carved. Ardan, the coordinator, met me at her office. She was polite but clipped that day, unlike the previous times we'd spoken during info sessions. She didn't make small talk. She skimmed the packet without really looking up. "Thank you, Miss KALIN," she said. "We'll be in touch." I left her office with a knot in my stomach that I couldn't quite name. 4 days later, the email arrived. Subject: application status. Dear Varela, thank you for applying to the Adult Re-Education Grant Program. Unfortunately, after careful review, we are unable to offer you funding at this time. Reason: applicant appears to already have support from Family-Sponsored Educational Fund. I stared at the screen, then reread it twice. I didn't have any support. Not from the KALIN Family Fund, not from GERALD, not from anyone. I hadn't even heard of that kind of fund until I started applying, so I called Arden's office. She answered after the second ring. Her voice held the tone people use when they know they're about to say something that's not theirs to say. "I wasn't supposed to disclose this." She began, lowering her voice, "but I think you deserve to know. Someone contacted us, a family representative. They said you weren't in financial need and that you had a history of emotional instability." My breath hitched. Ardan continued gently. "They implied you might cause disruption in a classroom environment, said you had a tendency toward conflict." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The call ended with her saying, "I'm sorry." It was persuasive enough that we had to consider it. I sat still for a long time. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of my fridge. My hands shook as I folded the laptop closed. I didn't even cry. There was a new weight settling in my chest, heavier than sadness. Sabotage. It wasn't enough for them to erase me from the family photo. Now they were locking every door I tried to open from the other side, quietly but firmly. And the worst part, they did it in a way that looked reasonable, respectable, polished. I opened a drawer and pulled out my folder of application materials. Then the FAFSA emails I'd printed. Something didn't feel right, so I looked closer. The FAFSA portal showed a login timestamp from months ago I didn't recognize. Curious, I traced the IP address using an old tool from my temp job days. It led to a network registered to Joel's construction office. My cousin, the same cousin who once told me, "You overthink everything, V. That's your problem." I felt the breath leave my lungs. My fingers moved faster now. I checked emails from old internships I'd lost mysteriously, the conference invitation I never received, and a letter I'd written to a foundation years ago somehow intercepted and answered with a form rejection. A pattern began to emerge, and it had fingerprints. Family fingerprints. I almost couldn't believe it until I remembered something Isolde once said in passing at a barbecue. "We can't have too many narratives floating around," she told Gerald, eyes on me as she sipped sangria. "It dilutes the legacy." I thought she was talking about political messaging. Now I knew better. That night I opened a blank email and began typing. Subject line I know. It was addressed to Gerald. I wrote about the scholarship, the call with Arden, the FAFSA, login, the legacy fund I was apparently not fit for. Then I stopped, saved it, printed it. I didn't send it. Instead, I folded it neatly and taped it to the inside of my closet door. A private declaration not for them, but for me. They didn't get to decide who I was anymore. That evening, I went back into the storage drive on my old hard drive. Years ago, I'd helped Joel organize some digital family files. Photos, letters, scanned documents. I remembered thinking it was odd how much had been misfiled. I searched for Varela. Just one folder popped up, Varela: unsuitable for legacy fund. My throat dried. I clicked it open. There was a document inside. A letter from Isolde addressed to Gerald. She wrote about brand integrity and how positioning Isolde as the face of academic success would resonate more with community leadership. She even used the phrase Varela's unpredictability poses a long-term reputational risk. She's better positioned outside the spotlight. They hadn't just ignored me. They'd planned my invisibility. I closed the laptop and stared at the screen's black reflection. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't in years. Professor Baines answered on the second ring. Her voice still held that mix of sharp intellect and maternal steel I remembered from college. "Varela," she said. "Hi, Professor," I said. My voice was clear, steady. I'd like to write something, but this time not for silence. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The invitation came in a thick ivory envelope, sealed, formal, unnecessarily elegant, for what was really just a dinner. Isolde's handwriting was as precise as her intentions. Small gathering for Mum's birthday. Family only. Dinner at my place. 6:30 sharp. No hope to see you. No warmth, just a time and an address. I debated going, but I didn't want to be included. I wanted to observe. I arrived 5 minutes early, parking down the block. The house was new, modern grey, siding oversized windows, an architect's dream on a trust fund budget. I stepped out of my car and adjusted the scarf around my neck. June evening still held a breeze in Bethlehem. The front door opened before I knocked. Isolde didn't smile. "You came." Her tone wasn't surprise. It was calculation. As if she hadn't expected me to come but had prepared her face in case I did. Inside, everything gleamed. Hardwood floors that echoed each step. Candles flickering on the kitchen island, matching plates already stacked beside place cards. I caught sight of mine set farthest from Mum. We exchanged pleasantries, if you could call it that. "Wine?" she offered. "No, thank you," I replied. "Just water." As I followed her toward the dining room, something caught my eye in the hallway. A gallery wall. The KALIN legacy, the etched brass plaque read. Framed photos lined the corridor like a curated museum. Joel shaking hands at his business award ceremony. Our cousin Alyssa at her white coat pinning for med school. Isolde standing proud in front of her non-profit's new building with Mayor Stratton cutting a ribbon beside her. And then tucked near the light switch, nearly out of view, was a photo of me. I was 4 grinning at the camera with grape juice on my dress. That was it. No high school graduation photo. No mention of the essay contest I won. Nothing about the workshops I built for underprivileged students. Not even a shot from Dad's funeral where I'd been the only one to speak who didn't cry. I paused. Did you crop me out of the family reunion photo you? I asked, eyes on a familiar picture, everyone in white smiling on the beach. Isolde didn't hesitate. We only had space for the most relevant milestones, she replied. Yours weren't on public record. It was said with such poise. Cold surgical, not a jab and incision. I nodded once, just once. I didn't need more. Exit signs started lighting up in my mind like emergency lights in a burning building. Dinner was served at 6:45. Roasted chicken, asparagus, couscous. Isolde's husband poured wine generously. Gerald offered up his usual toast, and Mum smiled like a porcelain figurine, pretty posed and entirely absent. At one point, Isolde praised our cousin Tyler. He just submitted his early application to Princeton, she said proudly. Gerald lifted his glass. That's what I call a legacy in motion. No one looked at me, but I felt the heat of what they weren't saying. You are the pause in our legacy. I chewed slowly, quietly. In my mind, I composed lines not for them but for myself, a spoken word piece titled The Edited Woman. First lines began to form between bites of chicken. She was never forgotten, just misplaced between glory and guilt, cropped where convenience demanded quiet, where noise was required. No one asked about my work. No one asked how I was, but I kept watching. I saw Isolde beam as her daughter passed around her new napkin trick. Mom taught me this, the girl said proudly, holding up a crisp white swan. I recognized the fold. I'd invented it one summer when I was 9. I used to teach it at church picnics. I didn't say a word. Just picked up my napkin and with slow hands folded it into a crane, wings extended wide. Before we left, my niece tugged on my arm. Can you show me how you made that one? I knelt beside her. You want to learn something different? She nodded eagerly. I took a fresh napkin from the table, placed it gently on the sideboard, and began folding it into the crane. Step by step, her fingers mimicking mine. Wings open wide, I said, so it doesn't forget how to fly. She smiled, and I smiled back, not at her, but at what came next. Because I didn't just leave that house. I left the version of me they had built. And with every step I took towards something real, something mine, I started seeing their construction for what it was. A fragile facade stitched together with dismissal and manipulation. 2 weeks later, I got the email from the dean's office. Subject line, graduation speaker confirmation. I sat in my kitchen staring at it, blinking twice, before opening it, half expecting some cruel twist. But no, it was real. They had approved my application to speak at the community college's upcoming graduation ceremony. My topic, redefining legacy. For the first time in years, I felt like someone had handed me a microphone without muting it first. I threw myself into writing. After work, I'd stay up late, scribbling paragraphs and crossing out lines. I rehearsed it out loud until my voice cracked, until the words sat on my tongue, like truth that had always been there waiting for a place to land. I didn't tell my family. Not at first. Not yet. It felt too sacred to risk. But good news travels quickly when it's not protected. 3 days after the confirmation, I got a text from my younger cousin Dana. It was short, confusing. Sorry, meant to send this to Joel. Attached was a screenshot from the family group chat, one I was never in. Isolde had typed, "Let her have her little speech. It'll be sad and poetic like always. No one will remember it." Joel's reply came fast. "Just make sure someone reviews it. Don't let her go rogue on stage." I read it twice. Not because it was shocking, but because it wasn't. It felt expected. What stunned me was the tone, not anger, not concern, just casual dismissal. Like I was a nuisance they had agreed to tolerate as long as I stayed predictable. 3 days before the ceremony, I got called into the dean's office. He didn't meet my eyes right away. "I'm sorry, Varela," he said. "We received a formal complaint from your family. They expressed concern about your emotional state." I didn't respond. "We have to revoke your speaking slot." "It's for the sake of neutrality," he added as if he thought saying it kindly would soften the blade. I stood up, nodded, once walked out. I didn't go home. I wandered campus until my feet hurt, ended up in the library sitting at a corner table beneath a flickering overhead bulb, staring at my printed drafts. My fingers trembled as I spread them out like playing cards on a table no one else was playing. I didn't cry. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that makes people laugh with you. The hollow kind. The kind that slips out when you finally understand that the people who were supposed to lift you built their ladders from your silence. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by paper cranes, each folded from a different version of my speech. Draft 1, draft 2, the safe version, the real version, the one with my heart in it. The final crane, I folded it from the rejection email. Sharp edges, clean lines, perfect wings. I slipped it into an envelope and wrote one sentence on the front. "If I can't speak on your stage, I'll build my own." I mailed it. Not to the school, not to my family. To the editor of the local paper. The next morning my phone buzzed. "Isolde, we just wanted you to be okay." Her message read, "You can still attend, of course. Family comes first." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I said nothing. She would see my reply when the print hit the stands. The day after I got a response. Subject: "Your voice deserves more than one stage." The email was short. "We read your piece. If you still want to speak, our mic is yours. Regional Education Summit 800 in attendance. No edits." It wasn't from a dean or a family member. It was from someone who saw my voice not as a liability, but as something worthy of being heard. And in that moment, I understood something simple and enormous. I hadn't lost my voice. I had just changed the room, and the silence they expected from me, it didn't follow. The regional summit was held in a modest civic center just off the highway. No chandeliers, no engraved family plaques on the wall. Just folding chairs, rows of attentive faces, and a small wooden podium under warm, honest light. This wasn't their kind of crowd. These weren't people who called me difficult behind polished smiles. These were the ones who'd waited, tables-raised kids, alone taught night classes like me. The ones who had been edited out of stories, too. The night before the summit, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in weeks. Amid flyers, takeout menus, and old receipts, there it was my original speech draft. Faint coffee ring on the corner paper, softened from so many nights of clutching it without realizing. The first line made me pause. They said I was born from a broken branch of a strong tree. I whispered it out loud and something inside me settled. I didn't rewrite it to sound better. I rewrote it to tell the truth. Each line was sharper this time, not bitter, just clear. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Mara, a fellow graduate, and one of the few who'd ever really asked, "Are you okay?" She'd managed to snag a copy of the seating chart for the college's upcoming ceremony. My name wasn't on it, not even in the back row. Varela. She wrote, "It says you declined participation." Did you? No, I didn't. But someone did on my behalf. I scrolled down to the signature submission request. Final list, provided by Isolde KALIN, confirmed by administrative liaison. That was when the breath left my body. They hadn't just stripped my speaking slot. They'd removed me entirely again. This time I didn't write, An email, didn't call the office, didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I closed the laptop, took a shower, made tea, folded 3 cranes, just 3 each from a copy of my new speech, 1 line on each wing. Then I packed them in a small white box. Late morning, I met Arden for an early dinner. We hadn't spoken in person since the grant denial weeks ago. She chose a quiet booth near the back of a local diner, someplace without expectations. She looked up when I arrived, almost surprised. "I read your piece again," she said before we'd even ordered. "I didn't just read it. I felt it. You didn't drag them. You stood without shaking." I smiled. "Not wide, just enough." "That's the point," I replied. "Loud doesn't mean messy. Sometimes silence has sharp corners." Arden didn't respond right away, just nodded, almost like an apology was caught in her throat, but couldn't quite make it out. After dinner, I went home and checked my email one more time. There was a message from Lou, a classmate from speech writing. She'd always been quiet in class, but had a knack for saving everything. She'd sent me an audio file labeled, "You should have this." It was a phone recording about 3 minutes long. Isolde's voice, unmistakable calm, clipped. "Just tell them she's not stable enough. She'll derail the whole tone of the ceremony." Then GERALD, chuckling faintly, "It's better this way. Legacy has to look clean." They thought it had been deleted. They were wrong. The file was scheduled to go live, courtesy of Lou's older brother, a journalism major, who knew how to time a post for maximum reach. Set for 9:40 May, same hour as the graduation. No commentary, no drama. Just truth stripped of spin, stripped of their control. That night I stayed up to finish my folding. The final crane was made from a page I'd torn out of my journal, the one that still had scribbled lines. From a time when I thought the only way to be seen was to be quiet enough, agreeable enough, useful enough to fit. I folded slowly with intention. Then I slipped it into my coat pocket. The Civic Center was empty when I arrived to rehearse. The stage was small, no spotlight, no frills. I stepped up, holding nothing but the crane in my hand. The microphone was still turned off. Didn't matter. I looked out into the empty chairs and whispered, "They built the table." I brought the truth. Then I exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be allowed in. I felt like I had already arrived. I didn't need a spotlight. I needed a mirror. And that morning, standing backstage in a city that didn't know my family name, I finally saw myself clearly. Philadelphia's Regional Education Summit had filled the Civic Hall with more than 800 people, teachers from underfunded districts, community leaders, parents, students, survivors, builders. No one there had been coached to smile through gritted teeth or nod when someone said she's just sensitive. No one there had heard the KALIN name and expected a speech in pristine tones about legacy and structure and endowments. When the MC introduced me, they didn't mention my last name. "Please welcome writer, mentor, and advocate for the invisible Betrayal." I stepped forward with the box of folded cranes tucked under one arm and the final speech in my hand, creased handwritten mine. The mic was warm from the last speaker, but the room was hushed. Still, I didn't start loud. I started honest. "Some families pass down heirlooms," I said, voice steady. Mine passed down silence. Heads lifted. Phones went down. I didn't tell them about Isolde or GERALD or Joel by name. I told them about what it feels like to be photographed but never framed, to be seated near trash cans at celebrations you helped pay for, to have your name erased not once, but so subtly and so frequently that even you start to question whether you ever existed in the first place. I was taught, I continued, that worth is earned by being quiet, by not taking up space unless someone invites you to. Then I opened the box. Inside were dozens of paper cranes, each made from the drafts they tried to silence. I stepped down from the podium and handed one to a young girl in the front row. Her eyes lit up. She read the message out loud. You don't need permission to take up space. Gasps spread like ripples. I walked through the aisles, passing out more. Legacy is not inheritance. It's courage. They called me a shadow. I became a light switch. By the time I returned to the mic, half the room held wings made of my broken words now flying. What I didn't know in that moment was that one of the summit volunteers had decided to live stream the event. They thought my session would be inspiring. They didn't expect it to explode. But by the time I reached the closing paragraph, people online were already quoting me. Broken homes don't raise broken people. They raise architects of their own worth. That line spread like wildfire. Back in Bethlehem, as my former classmates and family gathered for the graduation, I'd been erased from Gerald's phone, lit up. It was a video. He watched the stream in silence. His jaw clenched, but for once he didn't correct or redirect. He looked down, then away. Isolde left the auditorium 5 minutes later. Someone said she looked ill. I didn't care enough to ask. I ended the speech without fury. To anyone who's ever been seated by the kitchen door, I said your story matters. Write it, fold it, speak it. The room stood. No screaming, no chants, just the roar of stillness after truth. Backstage, as I was packing my things, a little girl, no older than 7, came up to me. She held out one of my cranes. I want to make one too, she said. I knelt down to meet her eyes. Then make it in your name, I told her, not anyone else's. She smiled and ran off already, unfolding her own page. 10 minutes later, while sipping water and watching the crowd filter out, my phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. I saw it. That was it. No apology, no denial, just acknowledgement. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I clicked it off, tucked the phone in my coat and looked out the window. I didn't need his words. I already had my own, and still they kept coming. A week after the summit, Gerald texted again. You made your point. No apology, no acknowledgement of what came before. Just that clipped entitled as if everything that had unfolded had been a matter of proving something to him. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I pressed delete. Not out of anger, just choice. Sometimes silence is the only boundary people understand. Isolde never reached out. Joel, I later learned, quietly removed the family KALIN legacy page from his firm's website, the one that used to list every grandchild's achievements except mine. None of them said the words that mattered. But for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need them to. What I had needed all along was a new table. 1 month later, I opened the doors to my first community writing course. 12 folding chairs, 1 long table, a stack of paper, and in the center a single crane. I placed it down gently and said to the group, this isn't a symbol of pain. It's proof that even something folded can still fly. I saw eyes light up, not in admiration, in recognition. One of those eyes belonged to Jamari. He'd been the kid who once stood beneath a hallway projector, who looked up at a slideshow and whispered, they forgot someone. Now he was standing beside me, co-teacher, co-founder. Together we were launching a small publication called Chairs by the Kitchen, a zine, a home, a space where stories that never made the family newsletters would finally breathe. We curated essays, poems, even comics, all written by those who'd sat on folding chairs while others toasted over crystal. And we printed the first volume with a dedication page that read, to every name that was misspelled, misplaced, or missing. I didn't expect what came next. Gerald showed up. It was the final session of our first workshop cycle. I was stacking feedback sheets. Jamari was locking the storage cabinet, and there he was standing awkwardly at the back of the room beneath the handmade poster that read Redefining Legacy. He didn't speak right away, just walked over to the main table, reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a paper crane. It was wrinkled uneven. One wing sagged lower than the other. The folds were too tight in some places, torn at the creases in others. I tried, he said quietly. I looked at it at him, then shook my head just once. That's yours to keep, I said, but he didn't take it back. He left it there on the table and walked out, not waiting for a response. I picked it up. The paper was from an old church bulletin, words of grace and rebirth still faint along the edge. I didn't crumble it. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I placed it in the glass case near the workshop entrance, the one that held our community's first stories, our first zine, and every crane that had been handed back in trust, not as forgiveness, not as peace, but as context. Some pain stays, some wounds should, because they remind you of what you built to survive. A week later, I walked past the school auditorium, the one that once told me no. Now, taped across the locked front doors, were posters announcing my upcoming lecture series. Topic: the architecture of silence and how to dismantle it. I smiled. Not wide, not triumphant, just whole. That afternoon after class, I sat at a table in the center of our shared writing space. No fanfare, no microphone, just me. One last crane and a name card. This time the card didn't have a typo. No one had scratched it out. No one had replaced it with someone else's. It said in simple font, Viraline, founder speaker, daughter survivor, and no one dared move it.